all. It's just after 8:30, so we will start. And welcome. Welcome to those on live stream. We also have Chair Bruce Robertson and Jane as well, zooming in. As Bruce is on Zoom, then he has asked me to chair the meeting. I believe we have a quorum. I note apologies from Lindsay McKenzie, Alex Crackett and Ian Pottinger. Are there any other apologies? There would appear to be none. Someone please move those apologies. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Abstentions carried. Thank you. Note any updates and declarations of interest? There would appear to be none. Just remind all to update your interest register for any changes. Right, if we can move to the minutes of the previous meetings. First one held on 29th of September 2021. Moved. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Nobby. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions carried. Thank you. Next is the extraordinary meeting on the 3rd of November. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Abstentions carried. Thank you. And lastly, the extraordinary meeting held on the 15th of November. Thank you, Nobby. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Abstentions carried. Thank you. Apologies, I'm just moving paper copy as my electronic one isn't here. Isn't working. If we move on to the working together paper. Sorry, just before we do that, just thank you, Michael. Just advise that we have a major late item which will be discussed under public excluded.
Move that it be accepted for the reasons given.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Abstentions carried. Thank you very much. Also note that there isn't a minor late item to public excluded too, which is a verbal update on the annual report.
Move that's accepted as well.
So we'll accept that in the same resolution. Thank you. All right, working together. Jane, Bruce.
Jane's the better spokesperson for sure.
Yeah, I can lead off. Thank you, Ross. This is a reasonably short report this time. As it says in the summary, the main focus, as it usually is for risk and assurance, is the financials and the risk profile, which I'll talk to when we get there. It talks about the key tasks for this project early next year being two things: reviewing a final review of the project and then a legacy report. Just moving to the bottom of page 1, you'll see there that we have the one-pager working together framework attached as Appendix A. It's useful to keep referring to that because everything links back to that outline. So if there's no questions so far, just moving on to the budget. I guess the focus is the budget going forward. We have recast how it looks, and just to remind everybody we've been delivering well within budget, and we anticipate that that will continue. There's been no change to the budget for external appointees, but we do note that going forward, their presence will be less. So we anticipate that we'll deliver under budget there too. The working groups have now concluded, apart from one group which is being I shouldn't say reformed, it's being reconstituted to support the mayor. The big items in there are support for councillors, and the importance there is picking up on all the work that was done last year and making sure it's embedded in council. And you'll see several items in there where we see a particular focus. And then we have the independent advice and support, and finally the review activities. There's some notes at the bottom which I think that are self-explanatory, and just to the only final remark I'd make is the same one as at the beginning. We do anticipate, and I think Michael Morris is probably there. I can't see him, but Michael will be there. But we anticipate that this will be delivered well within budget. Maybe a pause if there's any comments or questions.
Nobby, you get a...
Yeah, Ross, I've got two. Sorry for being a bit slow there on the first one, which is at the bottom of page 1 that Jane made reference to COVID-19, and in the report there it says it identifies 96 individual positions in council that would need to be double vaxxed. I understand that figure is much higher than that.
I think we're on different pages. I've looked at, it's actually page 20 I was talking about. Sorry about that. I looked at the wrong number. So Nobby, we're still working together.
Oh,
and
sorry.
what I'm talking about is the framework. My apologies for the wrong page number. So you're probably might be ahead of yourself for questions. Is that right?
Yes.
Wouldn't want to be that.
Have you got any questions?
Are there any other questions?
Stop.
It's
Yeah,
page,
just a reflection on the comment that Jane made about the supporting the mayor's group, and just an update to that. At our last meeting, I think it was the last full council meeting, I undertook to approach Councillor Abbott to see whether he would chair a meeting in relation to the 5 elected members who said they were prepared to have an informal group that supported the mayor. Given that commitment by those members was prior to the media statement that referred to them as bullies, there has been some unease now, but he will still in the new year attempt to have a meeting with those 5 members. But I think we will have some reduction in the number as well.
Right, note that comment, thanks. Are there any other questions?
a wee bit on
further?
the risk register. We have 3 closed risks, 4 low, 3 low to medium and 1 medium. So we are fairly stable in terms of risk and much reduced from this time last year. Perhaps 2 risks to emphasize. The medium one, which is number 9, about losing focus on the foundations. We need to keep our eye on that one. And number 11, it is low to medium, but we want to make sure that, I think we've called it complacency through the transition period. We've made good gains to date. We've got a plan in place to capture them, but we mustn't get complacent or lose momentum. So these were the key points on the risk register. If anybody wants to query or has got any questions, maybe a pause.
There would appear to be none.
None. And the next steps we've talked about, really, the 2 things are reviewing finally how the project has gone and writing a legacy report, which we will present to council, and they will consider that with a view to it going to DIA and a request for a response from DIA, given that we commenced this project with a letter from DIA way back in August 2020. And that's all from me.
Bruce,
Ross, I just have one question, if that's okay, please.
go for it.
Perhaps it's to the members of the Chairs Group. And I'm just thinking about your point, Jane, well made about the risk of complacency. And I don't think we're overly high on that risk, but I'm just wondering, we are going into the Christmas break, and political leadership is important for continuity over that period. Have the Chairs Group worked through now what are the leadership arrangements over the holiday break?
So, yes, Claire.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I can come forward and I can advise the committee that the leave arrangements for councillors are currently being compiled and the arrangements for cover will be discussed at the Chairs meeting next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Claire. I just think you can see what I'm trying to get at is working together is about good governance and leadership. We've got a period when we're probably, well, hopefully many of us are on vacations. We have to think those ones through as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, thank you for your work. And could I please ask someone to move that we receive the Working Together project report? Thank you, Nobby. I have a seconder. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour?
Sorry, Chair, just before you do, Nobby, is that where you wanted your questions for the second half of that report around that?
No.
No.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstention is carried. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas, everybody. I'll leave now.
You too.
Thank you, Jane. Health and safety risk update.
No, it's all right. Andrew and myself that are covering this. Probably easiest if I come down here, Mr. Chair.
That's fine.
I'll take the report as read and ask
Yes.
any questions.
Nobby.
Just again, the issue on page 1, which is on Board Books 28. It says the assessments have identified 96 positions, but is it more than that now?
Mr. Chair, yes, it is more than that.
Okay.
At the PPP committee last week, the report indicated that approximately 160 roles had been assessed as being high risk.
Thank you. Nobby, do you have a further question?
Yeah, I've got some other questions in relation to how we're dealing with this whole COVID thing. Is this the appropriate place to potentially raise it, or do it?
I would suggest it is, given that it is health and safety.
Sure.
And I think.
Okay. So just a couple of things, 3 things probably for me. The first thing is I noticed that staff don't scan into this chamber. And while they may not be required to under protocols, it doesn't sit well with the community that see their members having to scan in, elected members having to scan in, and the media have to scan in, but the staff walk in and out of the place. So I just flagging that because from a public perception, that doesn't sit well, that they're having rules forced onto the public and we're not abiding by them ourselves. Now, we'll have different opinions about it, but it's just a public perception. I've had quite a bit of feedback on it. So I'll leave that parked up for one issue. The other issue is that I just want to reflect that what the Chief Executive just told me, because I think it's a really positive thing. I think the media and the public need to hear this, that the position of the organisation is that anybody who goes to Splash Palace, the library, or Hiwakatuia, and is asked to present a passport, will only interface with staff that have passports as well. So we're not having a different set of standards on the other side. I think it's really positive we've taken that, and happy if Claire can confirm that, because there's been some unease, and there was an editorial a couple of days ago that flagged up that we were forcing conditions onto the public to enter our buildings, but our own staff weren't reciprocating on the other side of that, I guess, that internal external boundary. And I guess the other issue is the issue of our obligations under PCBU, which is the internal stuff for Claire, but something that I'm quite interested in because it doesn't relate so much to the external internal boundary. It deals with the internal issues that we have within the boundary. So for argument's sake, somewhere along the line we'll have to deal with the issues of how we safeguard staff who work in the building from staff who are in the building who may not be vaccinated. So that's one issue. And the issue is I've had some feedback from people who are internally employed, who are immunised, compromised, and they're worried they're doing it. Now, the counter argument to that is, well, you've worked with your colleagues for the last 6 months, what's changed? Well, what's changed now is we've got another tool available to us in the kit, like the many tools that we've got, and should we be using it? Now, I'm not saying that we should use it now, but if you don't get your house in order, I guess, and know where your risks are under the Health and Safety at Work Act, then by the time you have the risk, it's too late. And so we've had some very spasmodic guidelines from the government and from the Privacy Commission as well about needing to have a policy in place. When you're dealing with staff, you can't just knee-jerk and make a mandatory decision. You need to have work through potential risks, work through how you'll respond to that, put it in the policy, put it to staff so everybody knows well in advance. So again, I'm just signalling there, nothing to be done right now, but if we get an outbreak, given that this building is a very large potential spreader and non-vax people are potentially greater spreaders than vax people, how we would deal with that, and whether we're giving any thought to that in advance, and how we deal with the internal issue of I'm working here, I don't know who the non-vax people are, and I've got some health issues, which makes me worried. So I guess these are those three issues.
So you just want those comments noted, Nobby, rather than responded to?
Oh, I'd like to hear from Claire or her staff.
Mr. Chair,
Where you're going on all three of those.
I think it would be useful for the public to understand that we are giving effect to the legislative framework that's been put in place. And if that provides a different requirement for the public as opposed to staff, then I'm sorry for the confusion, but I can only work within the framework that the government has provided. So the first thing is that all staff coming into this building are identified by the use of this staff ID. And I'd like to be really careful about what we individually believe about health advice as opposed to that which the government has access to, which we are unaware of and which we are unable to confirm or consider otherwise. What we do know quite factually is that not controlling, but being able to know where people have gone and who they have interacted with is one of the best tools available. And so staff moving around this building actually effectively sign in to each and every floor, including access to the first floor. Second thing is that there are a number of tools that Councillor Clark has referred to, and we are already employing some of those, such as additional cleaning, such as the wearing of masks, such as hand sanitisers. Councillors may have noticed a difference in the way that food is provided. We are doing things that ensure that there is a greater level of care for staff around the building. The third thing I would say is that we have, as required, taken into account the questions that MB put in front of all employers if they wish to, and considered that in relation to roles who are at higher risk of encountering COVID-19 than others. I made the statement last week at the committee excuse me, that all of ELT was vaccinated, not as a result of a requirement, but as a result of choice. But other than that, my obligations to provide privacy and indeed to recognise that most people still go to the supermarket or the petrol station, both of which are locations which you cannot require vac certificates for. So we are really working hard to make sure that we've looked at where staff are at greater risk and need to be vaccinated. I think that we need to recognise human behaviour comes into this, And so I've given Councillor Clark a comment, and he asked, can you give me an assurance that any vac certificate holder attending the library, Splash Palace and Te Wakatuia will not come into contact with any non-vaccinated staff? I want to be really careful with the language and say we have assessed the public-facing positions at those locations as needing vaccinated staff. So that should be the assurance that he is looking for. We are working through any employment issues that has thrown up, but I just want to make the point that we are, as always, dealing with people.
And I'll just add that these discussions are happening in numerous businesses, including my own, and I refer any of our staff and clients to the MB framework, which is very comprehensive, and that would be useful to be circulated, and also the Ministry of Health guidelines, and we follow those.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We provided those last week. You'll see that we've given full effect in terms of the mask wearing within this chamber, unless you are speaking. I would point out that the Ombudsman has provided some advice on the matters that should be taken into account when making regulatory policy, and the introduction of vaccine certificates is a matter of regulatory policy, and the guidance is forever being refined.
Thank you. Darren, you had a...
No, it's been answered.
No. Nigel, is that a pen up, or is it? Probably the only other thing I'd want to ask and add to the report is that anything you're experiencing or needs notified around antisocial behaviour that your staff might be experiencing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that the behaviour we are experiencing is an indicator of the level of anxiety and possibly anger that people are feeling in the community. Even a peaceful protest held here on Monday or Tuesday resulted in staff feeling very uncomfortable as a result of protesters photographing their faces, photographing their name badges. We are certainly finding that people are on what you would refer to as on a shorter fuse, and we have brought into the organisation armour guard security guards at Splash Palace and the library. We're constantly reviewing the need for that in the downstairs at the customer service centre.
Thank you. Nobby, did you want...
Yeah, just some reflections, I guess, personal reflections for me on what Claire just said. I don't want to be seen to be having any argument with her. I'm pleased about the 3 locations, because that's one of the big issues that the community asked about, and that was the part of the editorial 2 days ago as well. I still struggle with the concept that staff don't scan into this when everybody else that's here does have to scan in, given that we've got some elected members who are uneasy about that. Some are compromised themselves, some have partners who are compromised. It's not a big ask to ask staff to scan in to make sure that they are all vaxxed. Chief Executive said the ELT is, but we've got more than ELT in this chamber. And that's not a big ask for me. And again, that comes back to not just the internal external boundary, but it comes to some elected members are uneasy now that we're not using that tool to safeguard elected members as well. So some think about that would be helpful, I think.
Yes. Darren.
Thanks, Chair. Just reflecting on that and trying to bear in mind that as an employer, we need to be cognizant, or the organisation needs to be cognizant of the right to privacy of members of the public. The only way past that, and bearing in mind that for staff this is their workplace, for the rest of us it is not. I don't have a vaccine passport scanned every time I go to my workplace, but I do use the Tracer app. To maintain privacy, the only way we could do it is by actually having all staff that are in here at the moment zooming in. That's the only way you could maintain their privacy around their vaccination status.
Noted, thank you.
So two issues in response to that. Privacy Commission has already given us advice that any employer, and this includes the PCBU obligations as well under Health and Safety at Work Act, has a right to ask their workers is what he referred to, not employees, because elected members are deemed to be workers under that Act, that the organisation can ask anybody, including elected members, whether they're vaccinated. Those members or workers can refuse to comment, which is their right to privacy, which Darren's referring to. And then after that, the organisation has a right to then consider them to be non-vaxxed. I'm not asking to find out who the staff are not vaxxed. All I'm suggesting is if they're not vaxxed, they should Zoom in, as elected members are now being required to do. So if an elected member doesn't have a vaccination passport, they have to Zoom in, and quite rightly so. I don't want elected members to elect not to be here in person, because that reduces the ability to debate the issues and to deal with democracy, purely because they're nervous about what's sitting in the room around them. Now, I know we've got one that will Zoom in for forever and a day now, but we've got a couple that are considering staying away, and I think that's unfortunate.
Andrew, do you want to?
Just to draw it back, I suppose the key question to as to whether or not there is a requirement to understand staff's vaccination status hinges on the risk assessment, and I suppose that's where the perceived conflict, I won't call it a true conflict, but where the perceived conflict arises. Until you have a risk assessment saying that it is necessary for staff to be vaccinated to attend here, then we have no reason to ask the question, and that's the bottom line. There is no other requirement that requires the vaccination certificate for staff to attend the chambers.
No. Thank you.
Wow, this is where the public think that we're a group of fools and that we're inconsistent in our approach, and this is what feedback I'm getting. So I've got to have a passport to go to the library, and the staff that face me across that library counter will be vaccinated. That's insurance that Chief Executive's given, and that's a great result. What Andrew just said was, public are here today, media are here today, we're here today, we've got to be vaccinated by risk assessment to be here. And yet staff who attend don't have to.
Mr. Chair.
I don't get that. And I know we'll play some wording around whether there's been an assessment here or whether it was a decision made by councillors, but
Correct.
That's not what the public see. They just see one rule for one and one rule for the other.
We can't help their lack of understanding.
Yeah, well.
Mr. Chair, the risk assessment for this chamber, or the need for a vaccine certificate for this chamber, as indeed for the library, is not as a result of a risk assessment. It is as a result of a council decision. Council is free to make that decision. However, I still need to effectively manage within the rule of the law that I have in front of me, and that says that if this is the staff member's workplace and I do not deem them to be at high risk, then I have no requirement to make them double vaxxed.
Thanks. Nigel.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess the challenge we have is that COVID can't determine who is high risk and who's not.
Yeah.
That comes down to luck, to be honest. And that's the point I stick with, and I've been quite outspoken in many ways in the sense of where we should be at. I accept Councillor Clark's point. I also accept Claire's points that we've made. And it's just about, in the world that we're living, if we can be as proactive as we can, because we all know going forward that we have some challenges. Rather than being reactive, we have the opportunity of being proactive. And I just go back to the point, COVID's not going to determine who's at high risk. We can minimise, without doubt, in our venue, the one I work in, obviously it's like this one, it's, up to 12,000 people a week that come through it. We are highly vulnerable in that particular venue, and not quite so much here, but I accept both arguments without a shadow of a doubt. So it's just a matter of, I guess, making sure that we are protecting and taking in my opinion, taking a really positive and proactive viewpoint to what is going to be a major challenge going forward.
Mr.
Final
Chair, I don't want
final
this,
comments?
exactly. It's not a game of table tennis,
No.
but I would just say that it's my job to make sure you are aware of the relevant considerations. And one of those relevant considerations that has only come out in the last week is the Ombudsman's guidance on the basis that regulatory policies are based on sound evidential basis. It is not local government's job to determine health matters. That is the government's job. So I continue to work within the context I have.
Thank you. I'll draw that to a
Just a final comment, Chair.
quick one.
Said the
If it's relevant.
Well, it is relevant because I think one of the other things that we haven't identified, but we all know is there's a huge amount of inconsistency here. And I just can't see how we put at risk non-vax people being in this chamber on the assumption that they have some sort of privacy rights, where in fact what we're struggling with is a reputation in our community, and wider than that, that across all the councils there's so much inconsistency, it's embarrassing. I mean, you just got to look what they've done in Dunedin, what they've done in Thames Coromandel. I mean, and we're constantly challenged about it. Why don't you just blanket across and make everybody require? Now, I didn't take that position, because as I've said to Claire and others, I think that was an overreaction. But I still don't get the privacy. It doesn't breach a person's privilege to ask them to Zoom in from an adjoining room.
All right, no comments. So
Yep, thank
this
you.
will just be an evolving process. And we would look forward to clearer guidelines coming from Wellington.
I'm happy to answer any other questions relating to the
Help.
report, Mr. Chair.
Are there any?
Not a question, just a comment. But I participated in this site visit to the Stead Street wharf and got a bit of a health and safety rundown from Lee. And he's got a very comprehensive document that he's using when he does this site safety, health and safety visits. And it was really good to see that that's evolving and happening, and to be able to participate in that. So I see from the report that councillors will have the opportunity to attend other such visits next year. Would really encourage everyone to get involved in that and see how it works and get that health and safety mindset.
Thank you.
Ross, can I make a quick comment, please?
Yes, Bruce.
It's only a short comment. Look, I just wanted to say thank you to Lee for a report which gives me a much better sense indeed of what you're hinting at, Bex, which is the overview, the approach that we are taking generally. Nobby, you've talked about PCBUs, and I must confess these are quite concerning results in our combined PCBUs.
Yep.
Trucks tipping over, no risk assessment, etc., as we've seen there. That is worrying. And so look, I will appreciate that one or two of those are under investigation, and I think we should just
You're frozen, Bruce.
He was agreeing with me and somebody's frozen him.
Oh, there's one other comment.
Just a reflection on what Beck said, or reinforcement of that. I think it's very pleasing that we've got a new focus on health and safety, and the way it's been operated. That different eyes are coming from different sections, involving different layers of the
so
organisation.
just leave it as I say.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. You might have to repeat it.
Carry on, Nobby.
Yeah, I was just going to say I thought it was, it's an interesting development within the organisation that we've got a new focus, and that we've got people cross-pollinating from one division, I guess, to another, because it's very easy when you live in your own world for a period of time that you get very complacent with things and don't see things that others might see. So, yeah, that's I've got some nice wee ticks down the side of my page on that.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, could I ask someone to move that we receive the health and safety risk update? Thank you, Rebecca. The seconder, please. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you very much. Project Management Office Status Report. Lee, welcome. And we'll take you at the report as read. Is there anything you wish to add?
Just that we're constantly sort of involved in the report. You'll see it's changed since the last one, and the next report you'll see in a few months' time will change again with a bit more of a risk register.
There we go, sorry.
So yeah, the report will just keep on evolving as we find better ways to report to the organisation and look at risks. Probably the only thing I'd like to add to that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Lee? There would appear to be none. You've got off pretty light.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've got one to comment that slide. On page 35 of board books, it shows the museum funding in there as being having some discrepancies in there. And when it says the original budget for the museum was roughly 39 million, and now it's up to 54 million. Just want to make sure that we're comparing apples with apples here, because I know the original 39 didn't involve some other funding that was being sought or potentially going to be sought. It was just that was the money we were putting in.
Yeah, so the report just shows our commitment.
Yeah, sure.
39. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions, could I please ask someone please move that we receive the report? Thank you, Nobby. Thank you, Nigel. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Performance report for 3 months. Patricia, welcome.
Morning. So I'll take this report as read as well. This is the quarterly report that's already been to PPP back in November. And I'll just pull up that one. But the one thing is to note that we've decoupled the Treasury report from this, and it's part of a separate report that you'll get later in the agenda.
Thank you. Yes, and I know it's been to PPE already, so are there any further comments or questions on the report?
Move it's received, Chair.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Nigel. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Bruce has just messaged that he's now lost connection with us, so he will try and reconnect. We'll move on. Patricia, you've got the next one.
I've got
too?
the next one. Jamie can't make it down. He's dealing with auditors this morning.
He wishes he was here.
So this is a report on the assumptions that we're proposing to use for the 22-23 annual plan. The proposal is that we use the same assumptions from the LTP, with the exception of those that are included in the report on page 73 of board books. And that's mainly around water reform, where we still are a little uncertain, though at least we have some legislation as of yesterday, or potential legislation. But it's inflation and interest, which are probably the ones where there's been the most movement recently that we're looking at more closely. And the asset revaluation will also need us to reconsider. And we'll discuss that further later.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Nobby.
So on page 75 of board books, let me get there.
Yep.
On the issue of diversity. It refers to Maori population being 17 to 19%. I've done some recent research on that, and New Zealand statistics are saying that the population size in the South Island is 9.8%, not 17 to 19, that figure potentially is a national figure as opposed to one that impacts on us. So just flag that, because I think that's important that when we're dealing with issues of diversity, that the Maori population statistics vary significantly across territorial authorities.
Yeah, I'll note that down.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor.
And just the last one was on page 85. I see in there that we've got assets and activity levels. There's reference there to the forestry assets valued on an annual basis. So is that the forestry company, which is now gone, I understand, or going, or is that the residual forestry assets that we still have beyond what was in ICFL?
It's beyond,
Beyond.
what, so it is a Sandy Point forest.
Thank you.
Thank you. There will appear to be no other questions. So please ask someone to receive the annual report and note the assumptions used in the annual plan for 22-23 year will be updated to reflect the current interest rate projections and construction market impacts. Rebecca, thank you. Darren, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Internal audit plan. Peter, welcome.
Morning, Mr. Chair, councillors.
Again, we'll take your report as read. If there's anything you wish to add or highlight.
I'd just like to highlight the sensitive expenditure review, and that there was four recommendations out of the sensitive expenditure review, 2 rated moderate risk and 2 low. These will be included in the internal continuation program and will be monitored and reported going forward until the actions are complete. The next part of the report, the draft business assurance plan, I'd like to just point out that we can add up to additional 2 reviews in the next financial year for 2022-2023. And just for the continuous improvement program, just note that there's now a continuous improvement risk scale at table 3 of that report, and that we've completed an additional 11 actions from the Deloitte reviews previously being reported. We currently have 4 high risks outstanding. 3 of those actions will be completed as part of the procurement policy that was approved on Tuesday, and the other outstanding one, the delegations, is under action and should be completed in the first half of next year.
Thank you. Darren.
Thanks, Chair. Peter, I may have just blinked and missed it for a second, but on the recommendations from Deloitte regarding these sensitive expenditure review, are there any actions at any point? Because just noting them doesn't imply that we're going to do anything.
That's well, I've sort of got Patricia to sit here and make comment on those recommendations. Councillor?
So those recommendations are being actioned as part of a continuous finance. So those recommendations are being actioned as part of our continuous improvement in finance. Some of them are just requiring, we would prefer to use some system improvements in that. So it's just the time delay.
So there are actions, it's not just being...
Yeah, so there are actions. The actions identified by Deloitte had already been identified by staff.
Great, thank you.
Bobby.
3 things about that report in relation to the credit card usage. It talks on numerous occasions about post-payment approval. So, but that's the nature of a credit card, isn't it? You don't need to use your procurement or accounts payable system. You go out and you zap the card, you've got authority to do that, and then the authorization comes after that. So I was a bit unsure about why they focused on that when they didn't really give us any examples of where that might have been inappropriately used. That was the first thing. They talk also about the one-up approval, but they don't clarify the situation with the chief executive, because chief executive doesn't have a one-up. She's at the top of the pinnacle, as it were, and so they should have clarified that as well. And I know we do have things in place for that, but not in that report, unfortunately. And the other thing was they talked about procurement processes as opposed to using a credit card, and they gave a couple of examples of that. So I was interested to hear from Patricia whether there's some greater clarity around where you can use a credit card and where you can't. But certainly the issue of the nature of having a credit card, it does allow you to really approve yourself at the time, but then you have to justify it.
Patricia.
Thanks, Councillor. Those comments, you're correct.
Yeah.
That is the nature of them. But what they were suggesting was that people were using their credit card instead of using appropriate purchasing processes. So raising of a purchase order, getting that approved in advance. On the other points, the one-ups, we had identified those as well. And because we're using a manual system at the moment, it's harder to pick up. And that's where we'll look to improve that.
Sure. And the last issue is a reference in there to one of the credit card holders using the credit card to pay parking fines.
That was a one-off thing, and we do identify those sorts. And we also pick up personal expenditure as well. When you've got two cars that look the same, you pick up the wrong one. So that.
Michael, would you like to add?
Yes, thank you. Through yourself, the Chair, I just wanted to address the item in relation to the CE side of it. Look, CE expenditure in relation to approved policies that have been approved by Council. So that expenditure is administered by myself to make sure that it is compliant and within policy. If there was expenditure outside that, that would definitely be something we would need to take up to either through the Mayor or through the Council side. We have not had anything that's been outside policy from that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would just add, in future, as part of this, would we actually get the list of sensitive expenditure as well?
You would normally have got a sensitive expenditure report this month as well, but the team have been focused on doing that annual report. So you'll get the next risk and assurance will cover the last 3 months and through.
Thank you.
Just for you, Chair, I have been citing some of those. I have, and signing them as well. Say that I've seen them.
Good. All right, there will appear to be no further questions. Could I ask that we receive the report on review of sensitive expenditure dated November 21. Note the recommendations from Deloitte relating to the review. Receive the ICC Business Assurance Plan for years 22 to 23, and note the internal audit and continuous improvement program updates. Could someone please move that? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you very much. Welcome back, Bruce.
Sorry about that. Internet went down for some reason.
It's all right, we've nearly finished.
Yeah, I can see that.
Risk management update. Again, Peter.
Excuse me, Chair. At some stage, will we get to hear what Bruce was originally raising about the PCBUs?
Was there something, Bruce, you want before you got cut off?
I'll just keep that video off on the basis that it might make it more useful. Look, Nobiolo was saying two things. One is my appreciation for an effective health and safety report to get a better sense of what's happening across the organisation. The second thing was those are some concerning incidents with in our combined PCBUs. And I think we should be, as a committee, keen to see what is the outcome of those. They look preventable. I mean, I guess all accidents are, and I think we should treat those as significant and serious for our own purposes of being and getting assurance about our health and safety record with our contractors. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Peter.
Well, I'll take the report as being read. Just as a bit of a verbal update, we've conducted workshops for the 5 groups within Council. These workshops have been to build on each team's understanding of organisational risk management, to identify some of the key risks for each group, and to start a prioritisation exercise for each of those. Moving forward, I'll be working with each of the group's leadership teams to develop their risk registers. Once these have been approved, we'll migrate them into the ProMat risk module so that we can start reporting on these. For that, Appendix A has an example of the information available from ProMat for each of these risks.
Are there any comments or questions for Peter? Nobby?
On page 122 of board books, the risk register there highlights a risk for our computer systems or information systems to be breached. Went to a recent zone meeting. Excellent.
I think Councillor Clark just asked about a risk that came to fruition.
So interesting, at the zone meeting, we had a presentation by one of the senior managers in the, I can't remember the exact word, but it's basically the spy agency for New Zealand. And what he said was large organisations like large councils, large DHBs need to do more in this space. And I've raised this with Michael as well. In fact, I gave him the name of an agency, and I can't remember what it is, but he'll refresh my memory in a minute. But there are agencies available.
GCSB?
No. The GSCB told us about there are external organisations that will come around and test your system. They come in, they know nothing about what's in the system. They just test to see where they can breach. And he said that's something we need to do. We can't assume that because we've got people like IT managers working in the system and maybe being there for many years, get very familiar with the system and don't see the cracks it can get into. There's no system fail-safe. But he did say there was an organisation, like Michael will know potentially now what it was. It's an organisation that goes around and they just come in cold and they check your system. And he said that would be well worth us doing that. Can you remember the name, Michael?
Through yourself, Chair. Apologies, I can't remember the name, but we do have another company that does do checks in relation to that. So we're working regionally on our cyber threat. In relation to our technology, hence why when you look at this from a risk perspective, the inherent risk is a lot lower, the residual risk is a lot lower, and that's because of the controls and mitigations we've got in place in relation to that, and the checks that we are doing on a fairly regular basis. We do get quite a number of attacks, as most entities do, and we're due for a cyber risk update at the next risk and assurance.
I thought it was interesting that the government advisor said that it's not just criminals from Russia doing this. He said you get inadvertent risk as well, and he alluded to things like our procurement policy, Mike, where we're interfacing with somebody on a tender, may leave the door open that a third party can then zoom in, or a staff member that's scooting around the system or being a bit lazy can also compromise as well. So they're the sorts of risks that we need to get on top of, I guess. Thank you.
There would appear to be no further questions. Again, I'd ask for a move to receive the risk management update report and note the risk examples and information provided by the ProMap risk module. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Nobby. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Committee work program, Michael.
Thank you. Through this, yourself, the Chair, I'll take this report as being read. It is an update on what are the reports that the councillors can expect to receive on a quarterly basis. You'll see it's quite a full agenda on every single risk and assurance committee, with one meeting to actually go over the program for the year scheduled going forward in August, but we needed to get this one approved, so we've got clarity going into the new year. Open for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Appear to be straightforward. Someone please move that we receive the report and approve the risk and assurance annual work program for the 21-22. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Nobby. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Policy program. Welcome. Waiting outside patiently.
Kia ora koutou. So I'll just take the report as read. This report provides the Risk and Assurance Committee an update on where we're at with the policy programme, which includes the Council's bylaws. So essentially we had a busy year around the LTP, updating a lot of policies that were related to the LTP, are regulatory required policies. And now that we have Hayden Powell, who will talk about the bylaws in a moment, on deck, which we're very glad to have on board, we can now turn our attention to some of the other policies and make sure that Council's in a good position to ensure those are in line with best practice, that we're identifying any gaps and we're updating policies where they need to be updated, just to put Council in the best position possible. So as I mentioned, next year will be busy for bylaws, so Hayden's just going to briefly speak to that.
Yes, thank you. Kia ora koutou everyone. So just quickly, it is very bylaw centric, the engagement calendar for next year. We've got 8 in total on the horizon, so there is quite a few. And the engagement around those is quite extensive. So there are some policies that we do fit in around those. And there'll be other smaller ones we'll deal with when we get some capacity as well. Of course, it is subject to change depending on how the program unfolds. And just quickly, there are 1 or 2 that we'll be trying to work with in conjunction with SDC to make sure we try and get some regional alignment where we can do as well.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Chair. Really just checking to see if we will look for opportunities where we can consult on more than one bylaw at a time. For example, I think last time we did the dog control bylaw with keeping of animals, birds and poultry, bees. Will we look to do that again?
Absolutely, yes. So when we do the dog control bylaw, we'll also do the keeping animals bylaw, and later in the year when we get to the water supply bylaw, we'll probably do the code of practice at the same time. That is reliant on aligning with SDC's processes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? There would appear to be none. So again, thank you for your report. Please ask someone to move that we receive the report on bylaws and policies review process. We note the engagement calendar for 2022 and the policy schedule, and note the electronic access acceptable use for staff and the acceptable use for non-staff. Someone please move. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you both for your work. Financial risks update. Patricia, back on.
Okay, so this is the new report, and it's going to cover sensitive expenditure. Will probably end up in this one as well. So this covers our treasury and debt management this month. From a treasury perspective, we've got the Bancorp report for September quarter. There's a little bit of additional commentary in the report, which I'll take as read about what's happening. But councillors should note, because we've got a borrowing is fixed, we still have the benefit of quite low interest rates, and we have one of the lowest costs of borrowings across the sector. And that will continue into next year as well. But we are watching the markets quite closely, though the recommendation at the moment is not to go and take out any more forward interest rate contracts to lock in any rates. The other point around Treasury is that we have had our annual review from Fitch, our credit raters, and they have confirmed our credit rating as an AA+, with a stable outlook, which is good. And that allows us to continue to borrow at the same levels. And that rating action commentary is included within the paper as well. Now on debt management, this is something I'm not sure councillors have had visibility of previously. We have done this as at the end of October, with the amount of debt outstanding in both rates and from our normal business operations, so dogs, building, their charges down at the tip. So the table on page, if my board books will give me the page, it won't. And the report shows that at October we had 4.4 million outstanding on sundry debt. This is without rates. A lot of that has now since been paid. And we're going to continue to monitor that. We haven't proposed any write-offs as yet, as we continue to manage through that. Rates debtors at that same period, we've done it in November before the latest instalment, and it showed we had just over $1 million outstanding, and it related to 747 ratepayers. Predominantly spread actually even between how much they owe, but 365 of those owe nearly $1 million in rates. Collectively, yeah. Currently, we've got 9 properties where we're at summary judgment in the district court for. And there's a further property where an abandoned land sale is being processed through the courts. So we do process through. We have powers under the Local Government Rating Act to collect, and we utilise those to their fullest extent. Now, is there any questions?
Are there any? Nobby.
Just a couple of questions. The AA plus rating. Any other councils got that rating? Are you aware of?
I'm not off the top of my head. Sorry, Councillor.
I think last time we had, at one stage, we had a AA minus, and there were only 3 in the country. So we're probably leading the pack, which is a great result for the council around our net debt balance. When you consider what other councils are declaring in relation to their 3 waters capacity to fund it, they've got no borrowing capacity, which we've got, which is excellent, I guess.
For yourself, the chair, and just in response to that, there are very few others that have got that ratings. I can confirm that there are only a few that are at AA plus.
Because I think we had a report, I think, going back a few months, might have been a couple of meetings ago, where there was an alternative rating used, and it was confusing because it threw us in with a whole lot of other stuff, and the rating was nothing like that. But that's the other issue, I guess, is does that rating affect our ability to borrow off LGFA?
Yes, it does. So depending on your credit rating is your additional spread they add to their base rate.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me,
yes,
Ross?
Yes, Bruce, go.
Yes, for some reason my picture isn't coming through, but I don't think that's any particular problem for you guys. Look, can I just say too, Nobby, that look, this is a good result for Invercargill City. There are definitely a lot of councils with AA ratings, but the plus side is really superb. Different situations with different councils, of course. The big boys up north have got substantial debt with growth. I was just interested, Patricia, in the advice not to take a fixed position in the market. So we've got $10 million falling due on April 2022. Is that correct? What is our strategy for that?
That, I think, is that it will be repaid out of surplus cash at the moment.
Right.
The concern is that the market is still quite volatile, and we're due to have another update with the advisor as into whether that volatility is now stabled. But it was at the point when he wrote that it was moving weekly.
Yeah. No. Look, it just depends what date you want to buy your bonds, I guess, and the different strategies. But actually, I've heard this similar advice elsewhere as well. So it certainly is good to get a report like this, Patricia, and it's one that we'll need to monitor because there is substantial challenge to our overall cost of borrowing. I'm only stating the obvious.
No other questions? Would appear to be none. Thank you, Patricia. Does someone please move that we receive the financial risks update report and note the information? Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Nobby. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Abstentions? Carried. That concludes the public session. Could I please ask or move that we now move to public excluded? Over seconder, please. Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, abstentions carried. I'll just wait for a moment now for